Welcome to What the Flick, everybody. Our discussion of the Americans. This is episode 7. It's Alonso, Duralde, Ben Mankiewicz, Robert Abele. Robert, thanks. So Noah Emmerich directed this episode.
Yeah, and it's hard to say what that means a lot of times, because I know from what I've understood from people who work in TV, like, it's not like they're telling the actors how to play this character that they've been playing for the last 2.5 years, you know. But I thought there were some cool visual touches. I loved at the opening pre-credits. Yeah, the opening pre-credit sequence.
What was the opening credit sequence?
Well, when they have the argument about Paige, and you know, when he says, you know, am I going to come home and just find out that she knows everything? And she says, I don't know. Then there's that shot from outside the house with the window where she's in one pane and he's another one, and there's that line between them. And I was like, that's nice.
Yeah. I think they give an actor a directorial shot when it's an episode that isn't so intense. I mean, this was a very, very except for the final scene.
I was going to say
that which was an action scene, but it wasn't like an intense action scene. There weren't a lot of things in play. This is another laying groundwork episode, I think. So I think that's when you give an actor his first shot directing.
Yeah, that could have been. Yeah, that's true. Although that action scene there was some stuff. I thought the way that they handled, there's a, you know, well, we don't, I'm not saying we could spoil, I forgot. When Kerry Russell shoots the woman in the head, I thought that was, you know, that was handled, that was very sudden and deft and
I love that all you have to go on that woman is involved in all this is the accent.
Accent, that's right. That's the only reason we know that it's okay, so it's okay to shoot her.
Yeah.
Right?
It was a little chaotic, though, that last scene. I wasn't quite able to follow all of what was exactly going on. I mean, that guy screwed up his cue, right? The guy in the car.
Yeah, he was supposed to honk. Well, he was supposed to honk for cops, and then he just started honking because Philip got into the the fight.
Brawl. And and who was the guy in the diner with the black activist?
With the African National Guard.
He's the guy that Elizabeth's asset initially found and discovered.
The other guy.
He's the guy they captured who was talking to the ANC guy is a CIA spy, right? Or is not? Or is a
South African.
I'm sorry, a South African spy working with the Americans.
Right.
Right, working with the Americans,
right.
And waiting for this other guy to show.
This other guy, this assassin from South Africa.
Okay, and he's the one they wanted to draw out by bringing.
Yes.
Okay.
To kill ostensibly this assassin would come in and kill the black guy.
So the ANC guy is talking to a guy who is pretending to be an activist, but is really sympathetic to the apartheid.
Right. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And then an apartheid assassin shows up and gets in the fight with him. So that's
okay.
But yes, it was a little. I had to do that in my head a couple times.
Yeah. I usually try to watch these episodes twice before, and I only got to watch this one once for some reason, so it didn't really.
But the big thing doesn't matter. That's all.
And all set to Fleetwood Mac, by the way.
That's right. All right. But the biggest thing was Martha. I mean, like
that was
by far.
I mean, just watching her in the bathroom. She was so intense that you're watching her and you're thinking, please don't. She doesn't want to drop anything, and you're like going, please don't drop anything. Don't get caught now. What are you talking?
Right. And then she's out and she's got him open there when she's putting the water on.
The close-ups of her hands.
Martha, hurry up.
The close-ups of her hands were great.
Now, what I think is kind of fascinating with this episode is named for the outside investigator who's coming in to look for this thing. My impression is that sexism is working in Martha's favor, because it feels like no one's even thinking about her as having had anything to do with it. Like, she's so invisible to them on probably a day-to-day basis that she continues to be invisible to them when they're actually looking for their super secret
all they
mole
want to
or
know from her is, did you take a secretarial note for the person who might have done this?
Right.
It certainly can't be you.
I think they have to start with the people that they feel loyalty to. I mean, like they can't start with the people who are there every day, and they have to start with the visitors first, and who's made an appearance and only once, and then you go to the people who have been there forever. And
I suppose I think
in the way that she's being talked to and over and around, I feel like
I think it's a really good point.
If they get to her, it's going to be a while, because it would involve they have to acknowledge her existence, basically.
She's a beloved employee. I mean, you wouldn't think of her first.
And I think there's a great moment then from Noah Emmerich where he treads on the cusp of what was probably pretty common 1982 racism. Like he described, because he doesn't like Aderholt.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the new black. He doesn't totally dislike him, but he doesn't trust him.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess these guys.
He's a go-getter. You know.
Right. But so he doesn't really trust Aderholt, and he's telling Philip about it. And he's just like, he's just one of these guys. He's always asking questions. He's always needling. I don't know, it bugs me. He's a black guy. Like,
Yeah.
right? He doesn't do anything else with that. And then
Right.
he moves on like, I'm not supposed to say that.
It just hangs in the air.
Right, hangs in the air. And then, of course, later we get Aderholt being the guy smart enough to be so specific that pen didn't sound right and to discover this. And I thought there's also a moment of, because what's Noah Emmerich's name in the show?
Beeman.
Right, so Stan.
Stan Beeman.
So Stan comes into the office in part just because he's like, oh, John Boy's talking to the black guy again. And so he goes in there, and then you have to have admiration then for Aderholt, because then he just gets shamed a little bit.
And by the way, I was a little. I thought these guys in the office after they find this pen could have been a little better at not. I mean, there was such a long pause, and they were like looking at the pen that like if anybody was listening in at that moment, they would have known they figured out.
The jig's up.
Then the last thing,
John Boy
said is, we'll continue this later. I mean, like you can't just go, see you later, guys, and add a few more things to make it sound like you're actually not nervous.
Here's why I love this. He's not a great agent. Like, he really isn't.
no.
Right, we've already learned that he's not a great
Right.
agent. He's not good when there was a dramatic moment on the street.
Sure.
He's missed a ton of things. Martha put a bug in his secretary. I mean, he's not a great agent. And the coming attractions would indicate to some extent that maybe they're going to figure out that he's not the best agent.
And he kicks the mail robot, who did nothing to earn that.
Right. So, but that said, Richard Thomas is great at playing a guy who's, I mean, he's, like, Stan has determined to do his job because he basically thinks doing his job is the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Thomas is a guy who's trying to get ahead in the organization, I think.
Yeah.
And they, both of them play those roles very well.
The other thing I loved about this episode was Philip realizing that, are both my wives lying to me? What's going on? I've got Elizabeth at home, like basically having secret talks with my daughter, and then Martha's keeping shit from me. So what's going on?
Right, I love
Women, right?
Right. Who needs this like polyamorous?
I know, but I ached for Philip at that moment where he's like, I'm gonna show her. I'm gonna go spend the night with Martha. And you're like, oh, you poor dumb son of a bitch.
And did we know that he had an apartment ready to go in case she ever asked? I was thinking like, oh shit, how they?
No, that was a really good TV moment of them scaring us into thinking that is he gonna have to kill Martha now? And then
no, I figured if anything he would call some mysterious number and suddenly there would be an apartment ready to go.
But no, that apartment.
That happens in Mission Impossible movies. I think in this case they thought this out ahead of time.
I mean, I love it that in like the late 70s, early 80s, the bread lines were incredibly long in every city except Moscow. But they're ready.
Yeah, the KGB's got apartments all over Georgetown.
Fake apartments ready to go.
Like
I mean, there are pictures of Martha there. I know it needs a woman's. Yeah. So, but Martha has figured it out. I mean,
she's figured something out.
Yeah, she's figured something out, and he knows she's figured something out. Considering all the sort of aggressive sex that they have, like the disguises are worth mentioning because they're critical to them, but they would take a lot of time, right? I guess we just don't care. We just decided not to care.
This episode had some of my favorite Philip wigs.
Right, but
oh my God, that was a
what
great
I was getting
Philip
at,
wig.
wouldn't Martha have?
Well, don't they talk about the fact that doesn't Clark acknowledge that he wears a tube or something? Wasn't there a conversation about that?
With Martha?
With Martha, that he wears a rug and he's kind of self-conscious about it?
Maybe, that could be, I don't.
Because she calls him out on like she's noticed, she's no dummy.
It seemed overly elaborate costume.
I was imagining the conversation if they ever figure out that Martha's put that there, and she'll explain why, and they'll realize.
That explains why he always smelled like spirit gum.
Right, and there's no Office of Professional Responsibility or whatever his fake office is.
Yeah.
But whatever his fake office is doesn't exist. Oh, you've been with a spy, and then she'll be like, well, he wears glasses, but like I want him to be such a good spy that when she puts his glasses on, they're prescription glasses, and he has to deal with wearing glasses that
give him a headache.
give him a headache in order to play the part. Because at some point I always thought, everybody, generally your partner at some point is going to be like, you put on your partner's glasses just to kind of.
Well, the other thing that was so ironic about the humor in this episode is that here Martha's like basically at the stage now where she knows something is wrong and she may have to figure out who Clark is, therefore ending this relationship at the time that Philip is at home wondering if what's the problem is foster child. Maybe he might have another child.
Yeah,
So Philip's thinking about extending this Martha thing to the point of having a child.
Oh, and did I mention I have another son?
May have to end. Martha's going, I may have to end this.
That was a nice moment between the
Philip and Elizabeth, where she apologizes and he's like, well, since we're opening up.
Right, I have a son, and they turn to each other in bed.
Yeah,
It's
no.
nice. They always come back to each other.
Their intimate scenes this year have been great. I mean, with the pot smoking, his thing with the flashbacks to his sex training. I mean, these have been like, great bedroom scenes between them this year.
Well, what a great show that fans of the show worry about things like, are his glasses prescription? First thing I was thinking about it, and then I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm really thinking about this.
Oh.
And about Martha, none of these people are real.
And we don't have, is it Gabriel, the
Yeah.
Franklin
That's
Joker?
Franklin
We
Joker.
don't have Gabriel in this episode, but it was pointed out to me on Twitter that back in season 1, Margot Martindale referred to Gabriel
Yes,
as
she
being
did.
her
Yeah,
predecessor.
yeah.
So he's not from out from nowhere.
Yeah.
He's actually, this was a
They got
setup
Gabriel back.
character.
That's
So.
right, yeah.
Right.
Whatever. And Paige.
She's kind of the A story this season.
Yeah, no question.
And not just them talking about her, but her actually being involved and participating in it.
Yeah, she's totally intrigued and Philip. I loved that scene when she mentions that Elizabeth had talked to her, and Philip is, there's that moment when especially when you're with your kid and you're like, I have to get out of this room right now, right this very second, but I can't show to you that I have to get out of this room this very second. I thought that was really good, and then it turns out real quick. I'm sorry that, and then but Elizabeth is not only working on Paige, but is sending those coded messages back about Paige.
Right.
So it's fully on.
I never really thought about this, but it's funny. If you are a liberal now, the canard used against you is, oh, you're a socialist, which now you can sort of laugh off because it's kind of like, well, but I just can't imagine having been a liberal in the 70s and 80s, like during the Cold War, when actually being labeled tarred a communist actually
Pinko commie rat.
carried some weight and meant something, And so the idea that they are appealing to Paige's sort of lefty leanings of civil rights and anti-nukes and, the stuff with South Africa, the anti-apartheid stuff, that somehow is all part of a Soviet plot. It's kind of like, well, yes, but
No, totally. It's not. That's right. That's a totally valid point. I mean, no sane person would have accused George McGovern and Frank Church of being socialists.
Right.
They were just.
Well, no.
They were just really liberal guys.
Yeah.
Sort of, but anyway.
But liberalism was also. I mean, I think it's a greater gap that made sense back then. You could be a liberal back then, and
Right.
no one would tar you.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's just bad to be liberal.
Now because liberal got so tarred that now it's like, even though it's an insane thing to say, now you can say, well, you're just a socialist. Like, no, I'm not a socialist. I would say capitalist. I just think, maybe we ought
People
to.
are more scared of you being a socialist than they were back then of you being called. I mean, communist was just like you threw it out there, but it didn't really mean anything to call somebody a communist. In the 50s, it did.
Right.
Yeah, I was
70s,
gonna say,
80s,
yeah.
no. I would say 70s.
Well, I don't know. I think it's also kind of interesting when an extreme exists. And so then if you're even in that neighborhood, like you get shoved in that department, Like, for example, my parents lived in Spain, during the years of the Civil War, and they were against the communists. They weren't fascists, but sort of fascism was kind of the other choice. And if you were remotely like just kind of conservative or even middle of the road, you wound up with the fascists because that was the big thing.
This conversation is an example of how dramatically far to the right the country has gone. Because back then, in 1982, throughout the Cold War, the extremists were the communists. Now the right has done such a great job of tarnishing the word liberal that now liberal is the extreme.
And Republicans don't even want to work with a liberal president.
Right, so now they can, who we don't even have. So now we can, so now it's very easy to just lump liberals and communists, socialists. That has become the new extreme because we've moved so far
everything
over
from
here.
the center over.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? It's crazy. But anyway, the show's great.
No question.
And we'll be back next week. I think we're gonna get some good Martha. Real
Showdown.
quick, do we?
Real
I know you
showdown.
don't. I'm gonna ask for a prediction. I know you won't give it, but it's okay. I think he has to kill Martha when the time comes. Unless she has fallen into, unless she owns up to the CIA first but I mean, she can kind of identify him. I mean,
If that were the case, it would be like probably the biggest dramatic moment of the year.
Yeah, and she would go into witness protection or something, or
yeah, I don't know, but I mean, Martha is in grave danger, and Martha, we saw this week from Jonathan Banks as good an acting performance certainly as we may see all year, but Martha killed it.
And everyone
Yeah.
at the show,
Let's
I've
get her.
interviewed a few directors recently. Everyone loves that actress who plays Martha. They say she's just amazing.
And she's
Allison Wright.
British.
Allison Wright.
British.
No way, really. Oh yeah, she's amazing, and I think that the show has been very, very clear that she's no dummy. Like, you know, she's love-starved, and I think that sort of made her easy prey for Clark. But I think that when she has to now when it comes down to her survival, she can, you know, go head-to-head with him and you know, try and outmaneuver him and you know, save herself in all this. So
I fear her demise.
Well, yeah, the fact that she's not the star of the show doesn't help.
Yeah, right. All right, thanks, guys. We'll be back next week. More of The Americans as we take a long, hard look at Alonso. See you. Bye.